So let's talk about the AI boom. We're seeing dizzying heights, trillions of dollars flying around. It feels like the future is here. But if you look just beneath the surface of these soaring stock prices, there's a whole other story unfolding. It's a story about circular money, massive debt, and a really high stakes bet on what's to come. So we're going to follow the money and see if this AI giant is standing on solid ground or if it's all just house of cards. You can't miss the headlines, right? AI is changing everything, and companies like NVIDIA are hitting valuations that are just, well, they were unimaginable a few years ago. And yeah, this has created a huge wave of excitement, but it's also making some very smart, very wealthy people pretty nervous. They're seeing signals that suggest this incredible growth might not be exactly what it seems on the surface. And that brings us to the big question for this explainer. Is all this incredible growth really built on a solid foundation? Real companies and real people demanding these products? Or is there something else propping up these massive numbers? I mean, on the one hand, everything looks amazing. NVIDIA's stock is an absolute rocket ship. But behind the curtain, a totally different story is playing out. You got legendary investors. We're talking Peter Thiel, SoftBank, even Michael Berry from The Big Short. They're all quietly cashing out. And when the people whose entire job is to see the future start heading for the exits, you've got to ask yourself, what do they know that the rest of us don't? To really get what's happening here, to understand this disconnect, we have to follow the money. And it turns out the path isn't a straight line at all. It's actually a circle. This idea, it's the key to unlocking the entire puzzle. It's a concept called circular financing. So, what on earth is circular financing? Well, it's a surprisingly simple idea, really. It's basically a loop where companies use investment money to pay each other. It creates this appearance of massive revenue growth and huge customer demand, which, of course, boosts their valuations into the stratosphere. Think of it like this. I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine, but with billions of dollars. Company X invests a ton of money into Company Y, and then Company Y immediately turns around and uses that exact same money to buy services from Company X. On paper, it looks totally legit, real revenue, organic growth, but in reality, the cash just went on a little round trip. And look, this isn't just some abstract theory. This is happening right now. Take this real-world example from our sources. Big tech players like Microsoft and NVIDIA invest a huge amount into an AI startup. What happens next? Well, in return, that startup commits to spending billions on cloud services from, you guessed it, its new investor. The investment money flows out from the tech giant, and then, boom, it flows right back in as revenue, creating this powerful illusion of demand. Okay, so that was a pretty simple loop, but now we're going to unravel how this concept builds into a much more complex and frankly fascinating system. This one involves the biggest names in tech, and it traces how the money really moves at the very heart of this AI boom. Okay, stick with me here. Let's trace this loop. It all starts with a massive investment in a company like OpenAI. But then OpenAI needs more GPU power than its cloud provider can handle. So a new player enters the game, a middleman, a new cloud company like CoreWeave. These guys are built for one thing, raw computing power. They take on huge amounts of debt to buy billions in chips from NVIDIA, build these enormous data centers, and then sell that computing power, sometimes right back to NVIDIA itself. And just like that, the loop is closed. It's a perfect, self-sustaining financial engine. So just to recap, you've got this whole web of interconnected players. Microsoft is the big investor. OpenAI is the end user, creating all the demand. CoreWeave is that crucial middleman, turning investment cash into actual infrastructure. And right in the center of it all is NVIDIA, selling the essential chips and then turning around and buying back the finished product. Everybody has their part to play to keep this circle spinning. So if the revenue is just going around in a circle, what is this entire system actually built on? I mean, where does the real money to buy all those chips and build all those data centers even come from? Well, the answer is simple, and honestly, a little unsettling. A massive mountain of debt. That's right. This whole AI race is being bankrolled with borrowed money, all riding on the hope of enormous profits, somewhere down the line. And to see just how shaky this all is, let's zoom right in on our middleman, CoreWeave, because their financial statements tell a really fascinating story. First off, just look at the debt. By late 2023, CoreWeave was already carrying $14 billion in debt. That is an insane amount of capital, and it's basically the price of admission to play in this high stakes game.
Okay, so you'd assume with all this action, they'd be wildly profitable, right? Making money hand over fist? Well, not exactly. In the first 9 months of 2023, the company actually posted a net loss of $860 million.
And here's the real kicker. Even with billions in revenue flowing through, its operating margin was a razor-thin 1%. One. There is basically zero room for error in this business model. They are running on fumes, and those fumes are fueled by debt. This chart just shows you the immense pressure they're under. CoreWeave has a huge backlog of contracts it has to fulfill. We're talking $56 billion worth. But to do that, it needs to expand its capacity 5 times over, which means taking on billions and billions more in debt, all while barely breaking even today. It is an unbelievable gamble. So far, we've kind of stayed inside this bubble of tech finance. But what happens when this whole system has to meet the real world? What happens when we, the actual consumers, are supposed to start paying for all of this stuff? That's when the music might just stop.
And this brings us to the fundamental paradox at the heart of the whole AI investment idea. The big promise of AI is that it's going to automate jobs and make everything super efficient. But in an economy driven by consumers, if you replace all the workers, who are also the consumers, who is actually left with any money to buy the expensive AI services you're selling?
And we're already seeing signs of this disconnect out in the real economy. Take Home Depot, for example. Recent data shows their profits are down because people are putting off basic home repairs because of financial uncertainty. So the question is pretty simple. If people are delaying fixing a leaky roof, is it really realistic to expect they're about to start shelling out for expensive AI subscriptions? And that's the bottom line. For this entire debt-fueled circular system to hold together, one thing absolutely has to happen. The end user, OpenAI, has to start making hundreds of billions of dollars in real, actual, non-circular revenue from real customers. And it has to happen very, very soon. A source in our research put it perfectly. The whole system is like a game of musical chairs. And this totally explains why investors like Peter Thiel might be quietly cashing out. They aren't necessarily betting on the long-term, real-world success of AI. They're just betting that they can find a chair and sell their shares for a massive profit before the music stops playing. Which leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought. We've seen the circular money trail, we've seen the mountain of debt, and we've seen the growing disconnect from the real world. In this high-stakes game of musical chairs, the crucial question isn't if the music will stop, but when, and who's going to be left standing without a chair.